The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. We present the original stories of the late Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, dramatised anew with Paul Collin Thomas as Sherlock Holmes, Ciaran Walsh as Dr. Watson, and Ricardo Ellis as Professor Moriarti.
It is with a heavy heart that I come before you with the last adventure of my friend Sherlock Holmes that I shall be able to relate. It was in the spring of 1891. You will remember, perhaps, that after my marriage and return to private practice, Holmes and I had drifted apart a little. I followed the newspaper reports of his cases, of course, and called on him quite often at the old rooms in Baker Street. Even so, however, many weeks would sometimes elapse between our meetings. And so it was with some surprise one April evening that I looked up and saw him standing before me in my study.
Good evening, Watson.
Ah, good evening, Mr. Holmes.
Have you a cigarette for me?
Holmes, Great heavens, man. How ill you look.
Oh, I dare say I've been using myself up rather too freely of late, old friend. You've no objection if I, close your window shutters?
No, of course not. Here. You're not afraid of anything, are you?
Well, to tell you the truth, I am, rather.
That's not like you, Holmes. What is it?
Air guns.
Air guns? What on earth do you mean?
There's a new and deadly type of air gun, Watson, which has been specially designed by an old acquaintance of ours.
Who? What? Professor Moriarty? It could only be he from your tone.
The same. A match? Give me a match, will you, my dear fellow?
Yes, of course.
Thank you. Is Mrs. Watson at home?
Oh, no. She's on a visit to an aunt. We're quite alone.
Oh, good. Is that whiskey in the decanter, though?
Yes. Now, look here, Holmes. What's all this about? There's something more serious in your manner than...
No, you never did quite believe in the iniquities of Moriarty, did you, Watson? You've said so more than once.
Yeah, I thought you exaggerated a bit. After all, Professor Moriarty is a respectable figure in public life.
Just so. And that's the very genius of the man. Even you, Watson, knowing me as you do, can't quite believe me when I tell you that he corrupts all London with his evil influence.
Oh, I can't quite believe that.
Oh, of course. To the world, he's still the professor, a great mathematician. He's respectable.
But what real proof have you that he's anything else?
None.
Well...
At least not until this last month. And even now, the chain isn't quite complete. But 3 days more, and I shall have him, Watson. 3 days more, if I live to see them.
You can't seriously suppose that your life's in danger, Holmes?
No?
Oh, you always loved to be melodramatic.
Melodramatic. Listen, Watson, this morning, this very morning, in those old rooms of ours in Baker Street, I saw him face to face. I spoke to him.
Moriarty?
Your distinguished professor. Within him a criminal strain of the most diabolical kind. That great white dome of a forehead, those hooded eyes, and the white face pushed forwards, oscillating from side to side like a snake's.
Oh, of course. If you believe the old heresy of physiognomy, then...
It isn't only that. Of course not. I worked for years to follow 1,000 different threads, and every one of them has led to Moriarty. He's the Napoleon of crime, Watson. The secret organizer of almost everything evil that goes undetected in this great city of ours. There he sits motionless like a spider in the center of its web, a web with 1,000 different strands. And he controls them, every one. But slowly, very slowly, my own secret plans to expose him have borne fruit. Every day, my net is drawing tighter, and he knows it, Watson. He knows the danger he's in. And that was why today he came to see me. I was playing my violin, as you know I often do, when I want to think. And suddenly, there he was, standing in the doorway, with his white face swaying in an evil way, peering at me with his hooded eyes.
Good morning.
Professor Moriarti, good morning to you.
Mr. Sherlock Holmes, I believe. How very charmingly you play.
How kind of you to say so. Won't you be seated, Professor Moriarty? I can spare you just 5 minutes.
Thank you. I will sit down. May I say something personal, Mr. Holmes?
Oh, certainly. No.
I'm only taken out by a memorandum book.
I beg your pardon.
I find it recorded here that you crossed my path on the 4th of January, Holmes. On the 23rd, you accommodated me. By the middle of February, I was seriously inconvenienced by you. And at the end of March, I was absolutely hampered. Now, at the close of April, I find myself placed in such a position through your continued persecution that I am in positive danger of losing my liberty.
That was certainly the end I had in view.
Then you must drop it, Mr. Holmes. You really must, you know.
Professor, you know as well as I do that you've made a slip. One single tiny slip. For years I've been aware of you, Moriarty, at the centre of your organisation. Forgeries, murder cases, robberies. 1,000 crimes were planned by you. 100 agents carried them out. Your subordinates were caught sometimes, but you never were. And yet you know, you made that slip. That single, tiny slip. And you know as well as I do that it will destroy you. In 3 more days my evidence will be complete. I shall have you exposed, brought to trial, condemned, and hanged. And you can do nothing whatever to prevent it. My will is inflexible. The 5 minutes is up, Professor, and I must really ask you to excuse me. In the pleasure of our conversation, I'm afraid that I've neglected business of importance elsewhere. Good day, Professor.
I think goodbye is the word, Mr. Sherlock Holmes. Goodbye.
And so it was, you see, Watson. That singular interview with the greatest criminal of all time.
And his with the greatest detective.
Oh, thank you, my dear fellow.
But what are you going to do, Holmes?
The police are gathering all my evidence against him. Everything will be complete in 3 short days. Meanwhile, I can only lie low. Are you able to leave your practice to come with me?
I have an accommodating neighbour.
Ah, dear Watson, I knew I could count on you. All right, then. Now, these are your instructions. Listen most carefully.
Instructions, Holmes?
I assure you, they are most necessary. Tomorrow morning, at 8:45, you will take a hansom cab.
I'll arrange for one to call.
No, you really must obey me to the letter, Watson. You will leave the house alone tomorrow morning and take neither the first nor the second cab which presents itself at the rank.
Very well, Holmes.
Hand the address to the cabman, written on a slip of paper, and tell him not to throw it away.
Then I'll drive, I take it, to Victoria Station.
On the contrary. You drive to the Strand end of the Luther Arcade.
I see. And then?
Have your fare ready. And the instant your cab stops, pay him and dash through the arcade, timing yourself to reach the other side at exactly 9:15.
Yes. But my dear Holmes...
Listen, man, listen carefully. It's vital. Our lives depend upon it. When you get there, you'll find a brougham standing close to the curb, driven by a fellow with a black coat tipped with red. Say nothing. Simply jump in, and he'll drive you to Victoria in time for the Continental Express.
And where shall I meet you, Holmes?
The second coach from the front of the train. A first-class carriage reserved for us. Good night, Watson. And as you value our lives, don't forget a single word of my instructions.
No, of course not, Holmes.
Until we meet tomorrow, then.
Until we meet.